The construction worker I'd fallen in love with just walked into my family's estate as my arranged fiancé. Let that sink in for a moment. The man whose calloused hands I'd held under pier lights. The man who'd split a $5 sandwich with me because that's all we could afford. The man I'd run 300 miles to avoid marrying. That man, standing in my father's marble foyer, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars. Have you ever wondered if someone loves you for you or for what you have? Have you ever questioned whether the person holding your hand would still be there if you lost everything? Most of us never have to find out. But what if you did? What if you stripped away the money, the status, the safety net, and discovered whether love could survive on nothing but truth? This is a story about two people who did exactly that. Two billionaire heirs, both suffocating under the weight of family expectations, both running from an arranged marriage, both hiding in the same small town, pretending to be poor, desperate to find something real. And here's the twist that'll shake you. They were running from each other. The arranged marriage they were fleeing, it was to each other. If you've ever felt trapped by other people's expectations, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story will change how you think about love, choice, and what it means to truly know someone. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. His name was Nathaniel Cross, and on a Tuesday afternoon in March, his entire life became a transaction. The conference room sat on the 63rd floor of the building that bore his family's name. Floor-to-ceiling windows turned the city below into an abstract painting, all light and shadow and a million lives he'd never touch. Nathaniel stood at those windows, his reflection ghostly against the darkening sky, while his father's voice carved through the silence. You're 29 years old, Nate. The merger with the Laurent family isn't just business. It's legacy. It's what your grandfather built, what I've protected, and what you'll inherit. Nathaniel didn't turn from the window. Below, office workers were heading home to families they'd chosen, to lives they'd built with their own hands, to futures they'd written themselves. I don't even know her name, he said quietly. Marguerite Laurent, 26, studied art history at the Sorbonne. Her family's pharmaceutical empire complements our tech sector perfectly. The wedding is scheduled for next spring. Nathaniel finally turned to face his father. A merger. You're describing a merger, not a marriage. His father's hand landed on his shoulder. Heavy, certain, final. In our world, son, they're the same thing. Your mother and I had an arrangement. We found contentment, respect. Love is a luxury for people with less to lose. That night, Nathaniel sat alone in his penthouse apartment. 2,300 square feet of designer furniture and curated art. A home that had been decorated by someone else, chosen by someone else, lived in by someone who felt more and more like a stranger every day. He looked at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. Even the toothbrush holder cost more than some people made in a week. Everything in his life had been selected, arranged, optimized for maximum efficiency and minimum authenticity. 6 months, he told his reflection. 6 months to find out who I am when I'm not the crosshair. He started packing. 1 duffel bag. He left behind the watches that cost 5 figures, the cufflinks that had belonged to his grandfather, the Italian leather shoes that required special care. Everything that marked him as Nathaniel Cross stayed in the closet. His sister Victoria found him as he was zipping the bag closed. She leaned against his doorframe, arms crossed, her expression caught between admiration and fear. You're serious about this. I need to know, Vic. I need to know what it feels like to be wanted for something other than my last name, to be loved for who I am, not what I'm worth. Victoria moved into the room. And if you don't find it, if you discover that everything Father says is true, that love is just a story we tell ourselves to make breeding arrangements more palatable. Nathaniel met her eyes. Then I'll come back. I'll marry Marguerite Laurent. I'll become the man they've been grooming me to be, but I need to know I tried. His sister's eyes shimmered. Then promise me you'll be careful. The world isn't kind to people who don't know its cruelties. You've been sheltered, Nate, whether you want to admit it or not. You don't know what it's like to actually need something you can't afford. I promise. Victoria crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him, a rare gesture in a family where affection was rationed like wartime supplies. I'll cover for you, but you call me every week. Or, I'm sending Father's security team to drag you home. He left before dawn, driving a 10-year-old sedan he'd purchased, under a false name, heading north toward small towns he'd only seen from helicopter windows. Behind him, the city that bore his family's name on 3 skyscrapers faded into memory. And 300 miles away, another heir was packing her own bag. Marguerite Laurent discovered her fate over breakfast on a Sunday morning. Croissants from the French bakery her family had patronized for 3 generations. Lavender jam imported from Provence. Fresh squeezed orange juice in crystal glasses that had survived 2 world wars. Her mother spread jam on her croissant with the same casual certainty with which she was about to arrange her daughter's entire life. "We've found the perfect match, darling." Nathaniel Cross. His family's tech empire complements our pharmaceutical holdings beautifully. You'll meet him at the engagement party in the spring. Marguerite's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. "I'm sorry, what?" "The arrangement has been finalized. Both families are in agreement. He's 29, well-educated, suitable in every respect. You should be pleased. Many girls would be thrilled with such a match." Marguerite set down her cup with trembling hands. "You've arranged my marriage without even asking me." "Don't be dramatic, Marguerite. This is how things are done in families like ours. Love comes later, or it doesn't. Either way, you'll have security, status, and the ability to continue the Laurent legacy. What if I say no?" Her mother smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You won't say no. You're a Laurent. We don't produce failures or runaways. We produce women who understand duty." Marguerite left the table, walked to her music conservatory, and played violin for 6 hours straight until her fingers bled and her vision blurred with tears of rage and helplessness. She'd spent 26 years being perfect. Perfect grades, perfect deportment, perfect artistic accomplishment. 3 years at the Sorbonne studying art she didn't even care about because it was expected. Every choice made for her. Every path cleared before she could stumble. Every dream edited to fit someone else's vision of her life. And now this, the final surrender of autonomy. Marriage as a business transaction. Love as a luxury she wasn't entitled to pursue. That night, she made her decision. 1 suitcase, cash withdrawals so she couldn't be tracked through credit cards, a bus ticket to nowhere in particular, and a new name, Iris, after her grandmother, who'd married for love and lived in beautiful poverty, dying happy in a cottage with roses climbing the walls. If you've ever had to choose between duty and your dreams, drop a comment below. Tell me what you chose, because Marguerite chose freedom, and she had no idea what it would cost her. Crescent Bay announced itself with the smell of salt and pine, a town of 7,000 souls clinging to the edge of the continent like it was afraid of being forgotten. Marguerite, now Iris, stepped off the bus with her single suitcase and felt like she could finally breathe. No one here knew her family name. No one cared about her degree from the Sorbonne or her mother's pharmaceutical fortune. She was just another young woman looking for work in a town where tourist season was the difference between surviving and thriving. She found a room above a bookstore for $300 a month. The bathroom was down the hall. The heating was unreliable. The view was of a parking lot, and it was the most beautiful place she'd ever lived. That first week, she played violin in the town square, her case open, her pride swallowed. And when the first dollar bill landed in the worn velvet lining, she felt something she'd never experienced in 26 years of wealth and privilege. She felt earned. Every $5 bill, every handful of quarters, every crumpled single. It was hers in a way that her trust fund had never been. She'd created something, offered something, and people had chosen to give her their hard-earned money in exchange. By sunset, she'd made $43, enough for groceries for 3 days if she was careful. She counted it twice, sitting on a bench overlooking the harbor, and felt richer than she'd ever felt in her family's estate. And 90 miles away, Nathaniel was discovering what it meant to be poor. Crescent Bay became Nate's home in his 3rd week of running. He'd tried 2 other towns first, both too close to major cities. Too many people who might recognize him from business magazines or society pages. But Crescent Bay was different, remote, insulated, a place where people cared more about whether you showed up for your shift than where you'd gone to college. He found work at a construction site, renovating the old community center that had stood empty for 5 years until a community fundraiser had finally scraped together enough for repairs. "You ever done this kind of work before?" Marcus, the foreman, asked him on his first day. "No, sir, but I'm willing to learn." Marcus handed him a hammer. "Your hands are too soft. You're going to get blisters. Probably hit your thumb a few times. The work is hard, and the pay is $12 an hour. You still interested?" $12 an hour. Nathaniel had spent more than that on a single cup of coffee in his previous life. "Yes, sir, I'm interested." That first week nearly broke him. His shoulders screamed from lifting materials. His hands blistered exactly as Marcus had predicted. He hit his thumb 4 times and nearly passed out from the pain. At night, he'd collapse in his room above the tackle shop, too exhausted to even shower, and wonder if he'd made a catastrophic mistake. But something was changing. The physical pain was real. The exhaustion was real. And somehow, that made him feel more alive than he'd felt in years. No assistants managing his schedule. No board meetings discussing quarterly projections. Just the simple, brutal honesty of physical labor and the satisfaction of seeing something take shape under his hands. By his 3rd week, the blisters had turned to calluses. His shoulders had stopped screaming, and he'd started to feel like maybe Nate Miller could be more real than Nathaniel Cross had ever been. That's when he heard the music. It was a Thursday evening. He'd just finished his shift and was walking to the market to carefully budget his groceries. $12 an hour meant every purchase mattered. It meant choosing the store-brand pasta sauce and calculating whether he could afford fresh vegetables or if canned would have to do. He was standing in the pasta aisle, holding 2 jars, comparing prices, when he heard it. Violin music, floating through the evening air like smoke from a sacred fire, like something holy and heartbreaking and so beautiful, it made his chest ache. He set down both jars and followed the sound. The town square was bathed in golden hour light. A small crowd had gathered in a semicircle, and at the center, eyes closed, was a woman playing violin like her life depended on it. Nathaniel had attended countless symphonies, had heard virtuosos in the world's finest concert halls, had sat through performances that critics called transcendent, but he'd never heard anything like this. This wasn't performance. This was confession. This was prayer. This was someone pouring their entire soul through horsehair and wood, and somehow making it sound like everything he'd ever felt but couldn't express. She played with her eyes closed, her dark hair falling across her face, her body swaying slightly with the music. And Nathaniel stood frozen, forgetting about groceries, forgetting about his carefully budgeted $12 an hour, forgetting everything except the ache in his chest that felt like recognition. When she finished, the crowd applauded. People dropped bills and coins into her open case, and slowly, reluctantly, they dispersed into the evening. Nathaniel approached. He reached for his wallet, then remembered he wasn't carrying hundreds anymore. The $20 bills inside represented a week's grocery budget. He couldn't just throw money around like it didn't matter. He pulled out $5, which meant he'd be eating rice and beans for the next few days. But it felt important, essential even. He dropped it in her case, and their eyes met. "Thank you," she said, and her voice carried the same quality as her music, something genuine in a world of practiced pleasantries. "That was extraordinary. Where did you study?" She smiled, but there was something guarded in it, something that recognized a kindred spirit of secrets. Here and there, mostly self-taught, she knelt to collect her earnings, and he noticed how carefully she counted each bill, how her shoulders relaxed when the total exceeded some private threshold, the same way his had when he'd gotten his first paycheck and realized he'd made enough for rent. "I'm Nate," he said, extending his hand. She hesitated before taking it. "Iris, just Iris. No last name, no elaboration." And Nathaniel understood immediately. She was hiding something too. If this story is hitting different, show some love with a like, and stick around, because what happens next will completely change everything you think you know about these two. I promise you're not ready for this. They fell into orbit around each other, cautious but inevitable, like planets drawn by gravity they couldn't quite explain. Nathaniel would finish his construction shifts and find himself drawn to wherever she was playing. The square, the pier, sometimes the parking lot of the grocery store where tourists loaded their cars before heading back to whatever cities they'd escaped from. He'd listen, drop his carefully budgeted contribution into her case, and occasionally she'd accept his invitation for coffee at the diner, where the cups were chipped, but the refills were endless. She asked him questions no one in his previous life had ever asked. Not about his portfolio or his connections or his prospects, but about what made him laugh, what kept him awake at night, what he feared and hoped for and dreamed about when he let himself dream. "What brought you to Crescent Bay?" she asked one afternoon, both of them nursing their third refill of coffee that had gone lukewarm. "Needed a change, needed to prove to myself I could make it without." He caught himself, "without the safety net I'd always had." She studied him over the rim of her cup. "You don't talk like someone who's always done construction work. You don't play like someone who's self-taught." They smiled at each other, an acknowledgement of mutual secrets, an agreement not to push too hard. In turn, he learned that she'd been in Crescent Bay for 2 months, that she moved often, that she loved the sea because it doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. "What are you running from?" he asked one evening, as they sat on the pier watching fishing boats return with their haul. She didn't answer immediately. Her fingers absently played invisible notes on invisible strings. "The same thing everyone runs from," she finally said. "Expectations, other people's plans for my life, the weight of a future I didn't choose." He understood then that they were the same species of refugee, fleeing gilded cages for the uncertain freedom of authenticity. Over the next 6 weeks, Nathaniel fell in love, not with the idea of someone, not with a carefully curated image designed to attract investment, but with the real, messy, complicated truth of another human being. He fell in love with the way Iris counted her earnings, with the same reverence others might count diamonds, the way she closed her eyes when she played, like the music came from somewhere beyond conscious thought, the way she laughed at his stories about construction site mishaps, and the way she never made him feel stupid for not knowing things that people who'd grown up without privilege learned young. He fell in love with her calloused fingertips and her thrift store dresses and the notebook where she composed music she thought no one would ever hear. And she fell in love with Nate, with his determination to master skills that didn't come naturally, with his genuine curiosity about lives different from whatever he'd known before, with the way he split a $5 sandwich without hesitation because sharing mattered more than having enough, with his bruised thumbs and his questions about the sea, and the way he listened like her words were the most important thing in the world. Neither of them knew they were falling for the exact person their families had chosen for them. Neither of them knew that the arranged marriage they were running from was bringing them together in ways no contract ever could. They just knew that, for the first time in their lives, they felt truly seen. One evening, they sat on the pier as the sun set in violent shades of orange and purple. Iris had just finished a performance that had drawn the biggest crowd yet, $73 in her case, a record. "I could stay here forever," she said softly. Nate took her hand, his construction calluses against her violin calluses, 2 different kinds of earned roughness meeting in the middle. "Me too. What would that look like?" she asked. "Forever in Crescent Bay. Simple, small, real. I'd work construction. You'd play music. We'd have enough, but not too much. We'd know our neighbors. We'd earn everything we had." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Sounds like heaven." "It does, doesn't it?" Neither of them mentioned the future beyond Crescent Bay. Neither of them talked about where they'd come from or what they'd return to. It felt sacred, this present tense life they were building, like acknowledging the before or after might shatter the fragile now. But reality has a way of finding you, no matter how far you run. The call came on a Tuesday. Nathaniel was at the construction site, finally feeling competent with a hammer, when Marcus approached with his phone. "Nate, there's some guy asking for you. Says he's your brother." Nathaniel's blood turned to ice. He took the phone with shaking hands. "Victoria wouldn't break her promise," said the voice on the other end. "James, his older brother, the one who'd always colored inside the lines. But I saw the financial transactions. A construction job in Crescent Bay? Really, Nate? Playing working class? I'm hanging up. Wait, I didn't call to drag you back. I called to warn you. Father hired an investigator. He knows where you are. He's giving you 2 more weeks to get this rebellion out of your system, and then the engagement party proceeds as planned, with or without you." Nathaniel looked across the construction site, at Marcus, teaching a teenager how to properly mix concrete, at the community center, taking shape under their collective hands, at the town that had given him something his family's billions never could. Purpose. Is it worth it? James asked. This little experiment in poverty tourism? Yes, it's worth everything. He hung up. That evening, he went to find Iris at their usual spot on the pier. But something was wrong. Her violin case sat closed beside her, and she stared at the water with an expression of profound grief. "My mother called," she said without preamble. "She found me. I don't know how, but she found me." He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "What did she say?" "That my selfishness has been indulged long enough. That the Laurent family doesn't produce runaways and failures. That if I don't return for the engagement party, she'll cut me off entirely. Financially, socially, permanently. Would that be so terrible?" Even as he said it, he knew the question was unfair, coming from someone who'd always had the safety net of infinite wealth. She turned to face him, tears bright in her eyes. She said something else. She said the man they've chosen for me is also running away. That he's hiding in some small town pretending to be someone he's not. That we deserve each other. Two cowards playing dress-up in other people's lives. The words hit Nathaniel like a physical blow. "Iris," he started, "don't you see how pathetic we are? How we've been lying to ourselves? I came here thinking I could find something real, something that wasn't about money or status. And instead, I fell for a fantasy, a beautiful fantasy, but still, it's not a fantasy." His voice was rough with emotion. This is the only real thing in my entire life." She stood abruptly. Her violin case toppled, spilling sheet music across the weathered wood. "You don't even know me. You know Iris, the street musician. You don't know Marguerite Laurent, who spent 3 years at the Sorbonne studying art she doesn't care about because it was expected. You don't know the woman who has a trust fund that could buy this entire town and still have change left over." The name hit him like a tsunami. Marguerite Laurent, his arranged fiancée. The woman he'd been fleeing from was the woman he'd been falling for. "Oh God," he whispered. She saw the recognition in his face and understood. No, it's not possible." "Nathaniel Cross," he forced the words out. "My real name is Nathaniel Cross." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of waves against the pier's supports, the distant cry of gulls, the whole world continuing on, indifferent to the cosmic joke being played out on this weathered dock. "This is insane," Marguerite said, her voice breaking. We were running from each other. All this time, we were running from each other, and we found each other anyway." He took a step toward her. "Doesn't that mean something? It means we're fools. It means the universe has a cruel sense of humor. It means..." She bent to gather her scattered sheet music with shaking hands. "It means I need to go. Iris, Marguerite, wait, please." But she was already running. Her violin case clutched to her chest like armor, disappearing into the gathering dark, and Nathaniel stood alone on the pier, surrounded by scattered sheet music, trying to make sense of the cosmic joke his life had become. That night, Nathaniel didn't sleep. He sat in his tiny room above the tackle shop, watching the stars wheel overhead through the salt-stained window, trying to understand the universe's twisted sense of humor. They'd been arranged to marry, two strangers whose union would merge empires and make shareholders happy. They'd both fled that arrangement, both seeking something authentic, something chosen rather than assigned, and in their flight, they'd found each other. They'd fallen in love with precisely the person they'd been destined for, but only because they hadn't known who the other was. Was it still real? Could something built on mutual deception be called authentic? But they hadn't deceived each other, not really. They'd both shown their truest selves, the selves that existed beneath the weight of family expectations and inherited wealth. Nate the construction worker was more honest than Nathaniel the heir had ever been. Iris, the street musician, was more genuine than Marguerite the finishing school graduate could ever be. The irony was almost beautiful in its cruelty. Their families had chosen correctly, had somehow identified a compatibility that transcended spreadsheets and market analysis. But the only way that compatibility could flourish was if neither of them knew about the arrangement. As dawn broke over Crescent Bay, painting the water in shades of rose and gold, Nathaniel made his decision. He found her on the beach. She was playing violin for the sunrise, and the music was different now, no longer just beautiful, but wounded. A song of heartbreak and confusion and desperate longing, every note carrying the weight of impossible choices. He waited until she finished, until the last note dissolved into the sound of waves. "I love you," he said. She didn't turn around. You love Iris. I love Marguerite. I love the woman brave enough to give up everything to find herself. I love the woman who plays music like it's prayer. I love the woman who counts her earnings from street performances with the same care someone else might count diamonds. He moved closer. And yes, I love Iris too, because Iris is who Marguerite becomes when she's free. It doesn't change anything. We can't stay here forever. Eventually, we have to go back. We have responsibilities, families, expectations. Then, let's go back together. Not as prisoners, but as partners. Let's go back and tear up their contracts and their arrangements and write our own terms. She finally turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, not easy, but simple. I choose you, not because our families arranged it, but because I found you. Because in a world of 7 billion people, you're the one who makes me want to be brave. They'll never accept it. They'll say we're being naive, that we're children playing at rebellion. Let them say it. We know the truth. We know that we chose each other when we had nothing to gain from it. We chose each other when we thought it meant giving up everything else. They fit together like two halves of a broken circle finally made whole. Marry me, Marguerite. Not because it's been arranged, but because it's what we both want. Marry me, and let's build something that belongs to us. Not to Cross Technologies or Laurent Pharmaceuticals, but to Nate and Iris. The people we are when we're free to choose. She was crying in earnest now, and laughing too. The sunrise painted her in gold. This is crazy. This is the most insane thing I've ever heard. Is that a yes? It's a yes, but only if we stay here another month. One more month of being Nate and Iris, before we have to be Nathaniel and Marguerite again. One more month of this life that belongs to us. One more month, he agreed, and he pulled her close and kissed her while the waves applauded against the shore. Hit subscribe if you believe love should be a choice, not a contract, because we're about to see these two walk into the lion's den, and what they do next will redefine everything their families thought they knew about power. 6 months after Nathaniel first left the city, he stood in the same conference room on the 63rd floor, but everything had changed. His father sat across from him, flanked by lawyers in expensive suits. Beside his father sat Marguerite's parents, and beside Nathaniel sat Marguerite herself, not in a designer dress, not in the carefully curated image of a Laurent heir, but in a simple dress she'd bought at a thrift store in Crescent Bay, her violin case resting against her chair like a statement of defiance. You've made your point, his father said, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. You've had your adventure. Now it's time to return to reality. This is reality. Nathaniel pushed a folder across the polished table. Marguerite and I are getting married, as planned, but not on your terms. We've drawn up our own agreements. Marguerite's father opened the folder. His eyebrows rose. You want to liquidate portions of both family holdings to establish a community investment fund? For small towns like Crescent Bay, Marguerite explained, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands that Nathaniel felt beneath the table. Places that need community centers and music programs and opportunities for people to build lives of dignity. This is absurd, Nathaniel's father said. You'd throw away millions on charity. Not charity, investment. Investment in the things that matter. Nathaniel leaned forward. You wanted a merger, father. You wanted our families united. We're giving you that, but we're also claiming our inheritance early, and we're using it to build something meaningful. Something that isn't just about making wealthy people wealthier. And if we refuse? Marguerite smiled, the same smile she'd given him on the pier when she'd agreed to marry him, full of defiance and joy and impossible courage. Then we walk away. We'll live in Crescent Bay. Nathaniel will work construction. I'll play violin in the square. We'll have nothing except each other, and we'll be happy. The two fathers exchanged glances. Nathaniel saw the calculation in their eyes, the weighing of public embarrassment against loss of control, the measurement of dynastic expectations against the messy reality of their children's autonomy. You're serious about this, his father finally said. More serious than I've ever been about anything. A long silence. Through the windows, the city sprawled below them, indifferent to the negotiations in this glass tower, full of its million lives and million stories, most of them more authentic than anything that had ever happened in this conference room. Fine, Marguerite's father said, "But you'll still need to maintain public appearances, board meetings, charity galas. The families have a reputation." "We'll attend," Marguerite agreed, "but on our terms." And we split our time between the city and Crescent Bay, 6 months each. More negotiations followed, lawyers drafting amendments and clauses and protections. But Nathaniel had stopped listening. He looked at Marguerite and saw her seeing him, really seeing him, the way she had when he was just Nate, the construction worker with soft hands and big dreams. That evening, they stood at the conference room windows as the sun set, painting the glass towers in shades of amber and crimson. "Do you think they would have found each other?" Marguerite asked quietly. Nathaniel and Marguerite, if they'd met at the arranged engagement party, maybe, eventually, but they wouldn't have trusted it. They would have always wondered if it was real or just two people making the best of a forced situation. Instead, we got to be Nate and Iris first. We got to choose each other when it meant something. We still get to be them, you know, every day, every time we choose each other again. She leaned against him. Through the window, he could see their reflection. Two people against the dying light, small and human and precious. "I want to write a piece," she said, "a violin concerto, about two people who ran away from each other and found themselves. What will you call it?" She thought for a moment, her fingers playing invisible notes against his arm. "The arrangement, but we'll perform it our way. In community centers and town squares, wherever there are people who need to be reminded that love is the only choice that matters." Below them, the city lights began to bloom like earthbound stars, each one marking a life, a story, a choice made in the darkness. And high in their glass tower, Nathaniel Cross and Marguerite Laurent chose each other again, the way they would choose each other every day for the rest of their lives, not because it was arranged, but because it was true. So, here's what I want you to understand. Here's the lesson that Nathaniel and Marguerite learned the hard way, and that I'm sharing with you now. Authenticity attracts what you truly need. When you have the courage to be your real self, stripped of pretense and performance, you create space for genuine connection. Not connection based on what you have, or who you know, or what you can offer, but connection based on the truth of who you are. Nathaniel and Marguerite could have met at that engagement party, could have smiled politely and made small talk and gone through the motions of arranged courtship, and maybe, eventually, they would have found common ground. Maybe they would have built a comfortable life together, but they never would have trusted it. They never would have known if the other person loved them or loved the merger, if the attraction was real or just two people making the best of an impossible situation. Instead, they took the terrifying step of showing their true selves, of being vulnerable, of risking rejection and failure and the discovery that maybe they weren't as special as their family fortunes suggested. And in that vulnerability, they found something their billions could never buy. They found certainty. They found the knowledge that someone chose them when there was nothing to gain, when they were just Nate and Iris, when love had to survive on nothing but truth. Sometimes what we're running from is exactly what we're running toward. Sometimes the universe knows what we need better than we do, but the only way to receive it is to be brave enough to be ourselves. Real love isn't about finding someone who accepts your carefully curated image. It's about finding someone who sees the messy, complicated, imperfect truth of you and chooses you anyway, who chooses you not despite your flaws, but because those flaws are part of the whole person they love. Nathaniel and Marguerite learned that wealth and status are empty without genuine connection, that you can have everything and feel like you have nothing if you're not truly known. That freedom isn't about having no obligations. It's about choosing which ones matter. They learned that writing your own story requires courage, that going against family expectations and societal pressure and the safe, predetermined path is terrifying, but that the alternative, living someone else's script, is a different kind of death. Here's what I want you to take from this story. If you're living a life that doesn't feel like yours, you have permission to change it. Maybe not all at once. Maybe not as dramatically as running away to a coastal town with a new identity, but in small ways, in daily choices, in the gradual accumulation of authentic decisions that add up to an authentic life. If you're in a relationship where you're not sure if you're truly seen, you have permission to ask for more, to be more vulnerable, to show the parts of yourself you've been hiding and see if they're accepted, because a relationship where you can't be fully yourself is a beautiful cage, but it's still a cage. And if you've been running from something, maybe it's time to ask yourself what you're running toward, because sometimes the thing we fear is exactly what we need. Sometimes the arranged marriage, the difficult conversation, the terrifying leap is actually the path to freedom. Nathaniel and Marguerite went back to Crescent Bay, just like they promised. They split their time between the glass tower and the town that taught them who they really were. They established their community investment fund and watched small towns flourish. They performed Marguerite's concerto in community centers and high school auditoriums and anywhere people needed to hear that love is a choice. And every morning, they chose each other again, not because a contract said they had to, but because two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their running decided that what they'd built was worth protecting. The world kept turning. The waves kept rolling in Crescent Bay, and two people who'd been assigned to each other discovered that the heart, given freedom, often chooses exactly what it needs. If this story moved you, don't just watch and leave. Engage with it. Hit that like button if you believe love should be a choice, not a contract. If you think authenticity matters more than image, if you've ever had to choose between expectation and truth, subscribe to Mr. NDY Love Stories for more narratives that will challenge how you see relationships, that will make you question whether you're living your life or someone else's version of it. That will remind you that it's never too late to choose yourself. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had to choose between expectation and authenticity, between what others wanted for you and what you wanted for yourself? What did you choose? And if you haven't chosen yet, what's stopping you? Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to write your own story, that running away sometimes means running toward yourself, that the most beautiful love stories aren't the ones that were arranged. They're the ones that were chosen, again and again, every single day. And remember, you deserve to be loved for who you truly are, not who you pretend to be, not who others need you to be, but the messy, complicated, perfectly imperfect person you are when you're brave enough to stop performing. The person Nathaniel became when he was just Nate. The person Marguerite became when she was just Iris. That person is worth knowing, worth loving, worth choosing every single day.